The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds of Marcus Chen's studio apartment in Queens, New York, casting uneven strips of light across the stack of rejection letters on his kitchen counter. At 32, Marcus had become intimately familiar with the weight of those letters, each one a reminder of another failed interview. Another door closed, another day added to the 18 months he'd been unemployed. "Marcus, you home?" The voice of his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, echoed through the thin walls, followed by her characteristic 3 knocks. Marcus glanced at the clock. 7:47 a.m. She was early today. He opened the door to find the 67-year-old woman holding a steaming plate covered in aluminum foil, the smell of fresh tortillas and eggs wafted between them. "Buenos dias, mijo," she sighed, pushing past him into the apartment. "I made extra breakfast. Don't tell me you're eating those instant noodles again." Marcus accepted the plate gratefully, though guilt gnawed at him. Mrs. Rodriguez lived on Social Security and whatever she made from cleaning houses. Yet here she was, feeding him again. "You don't have to keep doing this, Senora." "Nonsense. We look after each other here." She patted his cheek with a weathered hand. "Besides, you fixed my computer last week. This is payment." As she left, Marcus sat at his small table, the warm breakfast a stark contrast to the cold reality of his situation. His laptop, perpetually open to job boards and coding forums, hummed quietly. He'd been a software engineer once, a good one, working for a promising fintech startup. But when the company folded and the tech market contracted, he'd found himself in an ocean of equally qualified developers, all fighting for the same shrinking pool of positions. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, with skills in blockchain technology and cryptocurrency systems, unable to find work, while his neighbors, hard-working people like Mrs. Rodriguez, Joe the construction worker from 3B, and Sarah the single mom from down the hall, struggled to make their mortgage payments in one of the most expensive cities in America. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Linda in San Francisco. "Call me when you can. Mom's asking about Thanksgiving again." Marcus set the phone aside. He couldn't face another conversation about his job search, another round of well-meaning but painful suggestions. "Have you tried networking? Maybe you should consider a different field. My friend's company is hiring, but it's entry-level." By 9 a.m., he was dressed and ready for another day of applications and algorithmic coding challenges. But first, he had a stop to make. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Marcus volunteered at the community center, teaching basic computer skills to seniors and helping kids with their homework. It didn't pay, but it kept him sane, gave him purpose. The November air bit at his face as he walked the 8 blocks to the center. He passed the bodega where Mr. Patel always gave him a knowing nod, the laundromat where Maria worked doubles to support her 3 kids, the small Baptist church where Reverend Williams held food drives every Sunday. This was his neighborhood, his community, a patchwork of immigrants and working families, all trying to keep their heads above water in a city that seemed determined to drown them. "Marcus, my man." Deshaun, one of the teenagers from the center, jogged up beside him. "You coming to help with the coding club today?" "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied, genuinely smiling for the first time that morning. Cool. "Hey, my mom wanted me to give you this." Deshaun handed him a $20 bill. "For helping me with that Python project. I got an A+. Marcus tried to hand it back. "I can't take this. Do you know that?" "Nah, man," she insisted. "Said you spent like 6 hours helping me. That's worth way more than $20. The kid's pride was evident. "Besides, when I become a big tech CEO, I'll hire you. Then we'll be even." The community center was already buzzing when they arrived. Marcus set up in the computer lab, where a dozen seniors waited for their weekly lesson on navigating the internet safely. He'd grown fond of this group. Mr. Chen, no relation, who wanted to video chat with his grandchildren in Beijing. Mrs. Washington, who was determined to start an Etsy store for her knitting. Mr. Kowalski, who just wanted to read Polish news websites without getting viruses. "All right, everyone, today we're going to talk about password security," Marcus began, projecting his laptop screen onto the whiteboard. "I know it seems complicated, but Marcus," the center director, Janet, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Confused, Marcus excused himself and followed Janet to the lobby. A man in an expensive suit stood by the window, looking out of place among the folding chairs and children's artwork. He turned as Marcus approached, extending a manicured hand. "Mr. Chen, my name is Robert Sterling. I'm an attorney with Sterling, Hoffman, and Associates. He handed Marcus a business card embossed with gold lettering. I'm here regarding your great-uncle, Henry Chen. I don't have a great-uncle, Henry, Marcus said, suspicious. This felt like a scam, though he couldn't imagine what anyone would want from an unemployed programmer. Sterling smiled patiently. That's what most people say. Henry Chen was reclusive. He immigrated from Hong Kong in 1962, changed his name several times, and spent the last 40 years living quietly in Montana. He was also, I should mention, extraordinarily successful in certain investments. I think you have the wrong person. Your father was Michael Chen, son of James Chen, who immigrated from Guangzhou in 1958. Marcus nodded slowly. Then you're the right person. Your great-uncle Henry was James's brother. He passed away 3 weeks ago, and you, Mr. Chen, are named in his will. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the back of a chair. I don't understand. Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Perhaps we should sit down. There's quite a bit to discuss. They found an empty classroom. Sterling spread documents across a desk while Marcus tried to process what was happening. This had to be a mistake. His family had never been wealthy. His parents had run a small restaurant in Flushing until his father's death 5 years ago. His mother now lived with Linda, getting by on Social Security and what her children could spare. Henry Chen was a very private man. Sterling began. He made his initial fortune in real estate but discovered he had a talent for, let's call it alternative investments, cryptocurrency, specifically. He was an early adopter, mining Bitcoin when it was worth pennies. Marcus's coding background kicked in. How early? 2009. He never sold. He also invested heavily in Ethereum, Chainlink, and several other cryptocurrencies over the years. He lived modestly, very modestly, in a cabin outside Bozeman. His neighbors thought he was a hermit living on disability. In reality, Sterling pulled out a document. His estate is valued at approximately $847 million. The number didn't compute. Marcus stared at the paper, seeing the digits but not processing them. 800 million. 847 million. To be precise. Though with market fluctuations, it could be higher or lower by the time transfers are complete. He left specific instructions. The bulk of the cryptocurrency holdings are to be transferred to you, along with detailed notes on his investment strategies and philosophy. Why me? He didn't even know me. Sterling pulled out a letter, handwritten on yellow legal paper. He left this for you. Marcus's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. Dear Marcus, you don't know me, but I've watched your life with interest. In this family, you alone chose technology over tradition. Your father wanted you to take over the restaurant, but you followed your passion for coding. That took courage. I've lived my life in shadows, accumulating wealth I never spent, driven by fears from a poverty you've never known. But wealth without purpose is meaningless. I've watched you these past months. Yes, I had ways of keeping track. While jobless, you've continued to serve others, to teach, to fix computers for neighbors who can't afford repairs. You understand something I learned too late. Community is the only real currency. This money is now yours. No conditions, no requirements. But I hope you'll use it to prove that wealth can build rather than divide, that success can lift all boats rather than leave others behind. Don't let them call you unemployed anymore. Show them what you're really made of. Your great-uncle, Henry, CHENPS. Check the Bitcoin wallet addresses carefully. I was meticulous about security. The passwords are hidden in the Cantonese lullaby your grandmother used to sing, the same one my mother sang to me. Marcus set down the letter, his mind racing. This morning he'd been worried about making rent. Now there are some complexities. Sterling continued. The tax implications alone will require careful planning. I need to think, Marcus interrupted. I need to think. Sterling nodded, gathering his documents. Of course, take your time. Here's my direct line. Call when you're ready to proceed. He paused at the door. Mr. Chen, your great-uncle wasn't wrong about you. I've handled many estates, but I've never seen a beneficiary letter quite like that one. After Sterling left, Marcus sat alone in the empty classroom, staring at the letter. Outside, he could hear the familiar sounds of the community center, children laughing, seniors chatting, the hum of daily life continuing, unaware that everything had just changed. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and her breakfast offerings, about Deshawn's $20 bill, about all his neighbors struggling with mortgages they could barely afford. He thought about his mother, Too proud to admit she needed help, he thought about his own shame these past 18 months. The way people's eyes had started to slide past him at family gatherings. How Marcus, the software engineer, had become Marcus, the unemployed one. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Linda. Seriously, call mom. She's worried. This time, Marcus smiled. He had a call to make. All right. Several calls. But first, he needed to finish teaching the seniors about password security. Uncle Henry would understand. After all, community was the only real currency. As he walked back to the computer lab, Marcus's mind was already working. Not on cryptocurrency transfers or tax strategies, but on something bigger. They'd called him unemployed, as if a job defined worth. But what if worth could be redefined? What if success meant something different? Sorry about that, everyone, he said, returning to his eager students. Now, where were we? Ah yes, creating strong passwords. Let's start with something simple. Mr. Chen raised his hand. Is everything all right, Marcus? You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything's fine, Mr. Chen. Better than fine, actually. Marcus pulled up his presentation. Now, who can tell me why password 123 is a terrible password? As his students laughed and called out answers, Marcus felt the weight of the letter. In his pocket, $847 million. It was an impossible number, a responsibility he wasn't sure he was ready for. But as he looked around the room at these people who'd become his community, who'd sustained him when he had nothing to offer but time and knowledge, he began to see a possibility. They'd called him unemployed. Soon, they'd call him something else entirely. The class continued, but Marcus's mind was elsewhere, planning. First, he'd need to verify everything Sterling had said. Then, understand the tax implications. But after that, the real work would begin. His fingers itched to start coding, not for a job application this time, but for something bigger, a system, a solution, a way to transform wealth from a divider into a uniter. Outside, the November wind picked up, rattling the windows of the community center. But inside, for the first time in 18 months, Marcus Chen felt warm. The unemployed one was about to get a new job title, the one who changed everything. As the senior citizens pecked at their keyboards, following his instructions with determined concentration, Marcus made a mental note to call his mother after class. Then Linda. Then a tax attorney who specialized in cryptocurrency. But first, passwords. First, community. First, the people who'd held him up when he had nothing. Everything else could wait. The morning sun had climbed higher now, no longer filtering through cracked blinds but streaming boldly through the community center windows. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, the concentrated faces of his students, the letter that would change everything tucked safely in his pocket. Marcus Chen, the unemployed one, smiled and continued teaching. Soon enough, they'd all learn what that title had been hiding. Soon enough, everything would change. But not today. Today was still for passwords and patience, for community and connection. Today was for being exactly who he'd always been. Marcus Chen, neighbor, teacher, friend. The rest, the money, the choices, the transformation, all of that would come. But it would come on his terms, in his time, with his community by his side. After all, as Uncle Henry had written, community was the only real currency. And Marcus Chen was about to prove just how valuable that currency could be. 3 weeks had passed since Sterling's visit, and Marcus Chen had become an expert at keeping secrets. The cryptocurrency fortune sat in digital wallets whose keys he'd memorized and destroyed, following Uncle Henry's meticulous security protocols. He'd verified everything the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and dozen other cryptocurrencies were real, accessible, and worth more than the GDP of some small nations. Yet he still woke up each morning in the same studio apartment, still ate breakfast at the same small table, still walked the same 8 blocks to the community center. The only difference was the weight of knowledge he carried, heavy as a stone, in his chest. You've been weird lately, Sarah observed, shifting her daughter Mia on her hip. They stood in the hallway of their building, where peeling paint and water stains told the story of a landlord who'd raised rent 3 times in 2 years but never fixed anything. Everything okay? Marcus forced a smile. Just the job search. You know how it is. Sarah's expression softened. As a single mother working 2 jobs, morning shifts at a medical clinic and evening hours at Target, she understood struggle intimately. Something will come through. You're too smart to stay unemployed forever. Mia reached out for Marcus, and he took her, making funny faces until she giggled. "How's the mortgage situation?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah's face tightened. 2 months behind now. "They're sending letters." She lowered her voice. "I picked up extra shifts for Black Friday, so maybe I can catch up. If not, double quotes, she didn't finish. They both knew what came after too many missed payments. After Sarah left for work, Marcus sat in his apartment, laptop open to a spreadsheet he'd been updating obsessively. Every mortgage in his building, every story of struggle he'd collected over the past weeks. Mrs. Rodriguez owed $127,000 on a condo she'd bought in 1995. Joe from 3B was underwater on a place he'd purchased at the height of the market. The Patel family from the bodega had refinanced twice to keep their business afloat. The numbers were staggering, but manageable. He could pay them all off and barely dent Uncle Henry's fortune. But how? He couldn't simply walk up to neighbors and hand them checks. There would be questions, taxes, suspicions. He needed a plan, a system that would protect both his identity and his community's dignity. His phone rang. "Linda." Finally, his sister said, "I've been trying to reach you for days. Mom wants to know if you're coming for Thanksgiving." "I'll be there," Marcus said, closing his laptop. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Can you meet for coffee this weekend?" "Just us. Since when do you come to San Francisco for coffee?" "Marcus, what's going on? Did you get a job?" "Something like that. I'll explain when I see you." That afternoon at the community center, Marcus found it harder than ever to concentrate. Deshaun was showing off a new programming project, a simple app to help local businesses manage inventory. The kid had real talent, but Marcus knew talent wasn't always enough. Deshaun's older brother had been talented too, before medical debt from a car accident had forced him to drop out of college. "Mr. Chen, you okay?" Deshaun asked. "You seem distracted." "Sorry, just thinking about your code." "It's good, really good. Have you thought about what's next? After high school?" Deshaun shrugged. "Community college, maybe. Can't afford much else. Mom's already working 2 jobs." Another note for the spreadsheet. Another life limited by financial constraints that Marcus now had the power to remove. That evening, unable to sleep, Marcus walked through his neighborhood. The bodega was still open, Mr. Patel behind the counter, looking tired as always. Through the window of the Baptist church, he could see Reverend Williams setting up for tomorrow's food drive. The laundromat hummed with its eternal cycle, Maria visible inside, folding someone else's clothes for minimum wage plus tips. He thought about Uncle Henry, alone in his Montana cabin with nearly $1 billion in digital assets. What fear had driven him to such isolation? What had he been protecting himself from? Marcus's phone buzzed. An encrypted message from Sterling, monthly statement attached. "Please advise on tax strategy soon. Clock is ticking." The attached document showed his holdings had increased by $12 million in the last month alone. $12 million, earned by doing absolutely nothing while his neighbors worked themselves to exhaustion for a few hundred extra dollars. The unfairness of it all made him dizzy. Back in his apartment, Marcus opened a new document on his laptop. He'd been a software engineer. He knew how to solve complex problems. This was just another system to design, another code to write. But instead of programming languages, he was working with human nature, tax law, and the delicate dynamics of dignity. He typed, "Project Community Wealth Requirements. Anonymous distribution system tax compliance structure preserves recipient dignity scalable, beyond immediate neighborhood sustainable long-term impact." He worked through the night, researching charitable structures, anonymous giving strategies, and tax implications. By dawn, he had the skeleton of a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next day brought an unexpected complication. Marcus was at the community center, helping Mr. Kowalski with his email, when Janet pulled him aside. "We need to talk," she said, leading him to her cluttered office. "I got a call from our funding board. They're cutting our budget by 40%. We'll have to eliminate the senior programs, reduce hours, maybe even close the computer lab." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him. This place had been his anchor during unemployment, his purpose when everything else felt meaningless. When January 1st, "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I know how much this means to you. We can't even afford to pay you if we could." She stopped, embarrassed. They both knew he'd never taken a penny for his work here. What would it take to keep everything running? Full programs, maybe even expand. Janet laughed bitterly. A miracle. We'd need at least 200,000 just to maintain current operations, to actually expand. To pay people like you what you deserve. 500,000, minimum. Another note for the spreadsheet. Another problem that money could solve. That weekend, Marcus took the train to San Francisco. Linda met him at a cafe in the Mission. Her marketing executive polished a stark contrast to his faded jeans and old Columbia University hoodie. You look terrible, she said, hugging him. When's the last time you got a haircut? Nice to see you too. He waited until they were seated, coffees ordered, before pulling out his phone. He showed her the Sterling, Hoffman, and Associates business card. So you got a job at a law firm? Not exactly. Marcus told her everything. Uncle Henry, the cryptocurrency fortune, the letter. He watched his sister's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something approaching shock. $800 million. She whispered it like a curse word. Marcus, that's impossible. 47 million. And growing. Apparently, Uncle Henry was very good at holding. Linda stared at her coffee. What are you going to do? I've been thinking about that. Actually, I've been doing nothing but thinking about that. He pulled out a printed copy of his plan. I want to set up a foundation. Anonymous, charitable, giving, focused on debt relief and community development. Starting with our neighborhood in Queens. His sister, ever the strategist, immediately saw the challenges. The tax implications alone, I know. That's why I need help. You know people, Linda, good lawyers, accountants, people who can structure this properly. Why anonymous? Marcus, you could do so much good publicly. Think of the influence, the connections, and become like Uncle Henry. Isolated, paranoid, defined by money I didn't earn. He shook his head. I've spent 18 months being the unemployed one. I don't want to become the rich one. I just want to help. Linda studied him. This is about more than mortgages. Isn't it the community centers losing funding? Deshaun can't afford college. Mrs. Rodriguez should be enjoying retirement. Not cleaning houses at 70. Mr. Patel works 18-hour days and can barely keep the bodega afloat. His voice cracked. I have the power to fix all of it, Linda. How can I not? And Mom. Marcus had been dreading this question. I'll take care of her, but quietly, maybe through you. I can't have her knowing. Not yet. She'd never keep it secret, and then everyone would know. They spent the next 3 hours refining the plan. Linda's business acumen proved invaluable, her questions sharp and practical. By the time they parted, Marcus had a list of contacts and a clearer path forward. Be careful, Linda said as they stood outside the cafe. Money changes people, even good people, especially good people who think they're doing the right thing. On the train back to New York, Marcus thought about her warning. Through the window, he watched wealth and poverty blur together, Silicon Valley's gleaming offices giving way to struggling communities, then back again. The arbitrary nature of it all seemed more absurd than ever. His phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus, mijo, where are you? I made pozole, too much for one old lady. On my way back from visiting Linda, save me some. Of course. Oh, and I ran into the landlord today. He says he's raising rent again in January. Another $100. I don't know how much more we can take. Marcus closed his eyes. January. Everything seemed to be converging on January. The community center's funding cut, rent increases, the tax deadline Sterling kept mentioning. The weight of secrets grew heavier. We'll figure something out, he told Mrs. Rodriguez. We always do. But this time, he wouldn't just figure it out. This time, he had the means to fix it. The challenge was doing so without destroying the very community he wanted to save. Back in Queens, Marcus stood outside his building, looking up at the lit windows. Behind each one was a story, a struggle, a family trying to make it in a city that demanded everything and gave back so little. Soon, those stories would change. The struggles would ease. The families would breathe easier. They'd called him unemployed, as if that was all he was. But Marcus Chen was about to become something else entirely. The invisible hand that lifted his community out of debt, one mortgage at a time. He just had to figure out how to do it without anyone knowing it was him. The weight of secrets was heavy, but the weight of inaction would be heavier still. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment, plans churning in his mind. December was almost here. By January, everything would be different. He just had to make it through the next few weeks without anyone suspecting that the unemployed guy in C was actually one of the wealthiest people in New York City. As he opened his door, the smell of Mrs. Rodriguez's pozole drifted through the thin walls. Despite everything, the money, the secrets, the plans, this was still home. These were still his people. And soon, very soon, they'd all be free. Marcus sat at his computer and opened the spreadsheet again. Numbers and names, debts and dreams. He had work to do. The unemployed one was about to become the employed one, self-employed in the business of changing lives. One mortgage at a time. December arrived with an early snowstorm that blanketed Queens in white, temporarily hiding the cracked sidewalks and overflowing garbage bins. Marcus stood at his window, watching his neighbors navigate the slush, and made a decision. He couldn't wait for perfect plans anymore. People needed help now. The law firm Linda had recommended operated from a glass tower in Manhattan, a world away from his Queens neighborhood. Marcus felt underdressed in his only suit, the one he'd worn to too many unsuccessful interviews. As he rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Mr. Chen, a young associate, greeted him. "Ms. Winters is expecting you." Catherine Winters turned out to be nothing like Marcus had expected. Instead of the cold corporate lawyer he'd imagined, she was warm, direct, and had grown up in the Bronx. "Linda told me about your situation," she said, closing her office door. $800 million in cryptocurrency, that's substantial. $853 million, as of this morning, Marcus corrected. It keeps growing. Catherine's expression remained professional, but he caught the slight widening of her eyes. "And you want to give it away? Anonymously?" "Not all of it, but significant amounts, yes. Starting with paying off mortgages in my neighborhood." She pulled out a legal pad. "Tell me exactly what you envision." For the next 2 hours, Marcus laid out his plan. A charitable foundation that would identify families in financial distress and anonymously pay off their debts. No applications, no qualifications, no bureaucracy, just relief, appearing like grace. "The legal structure is manageable," Catherine said, sketching diagrams. "We'll create a private foundation with you as the sole trustee. Donations can be made through various mechanisms to maintain anonymity. But there are challenges, such as gift tax implications for recipients, potential mortgage fraud accusations, if we're not careful, and the biggest issue, how do you identify recipients without revealing your identity or violating privacy laws?" Marcus had been thinking about this. "I already know my neighbors' situations, and for expansion, we could partner with local organizations, churches, community centers. They know who's struggling." That could work. Catherine made notes. "We'll need strict confidentiality agreements and a compelling cover story for the foundation's funding source." They spent another hour working through details. By the time Marcus left, he had a timeline. 2 weeks to establish the legal structure. Another week to set up banking and transfer protocols. He could make the first payments by Christmas. On the subway back to Queens, Marcus felt lighter than he had in weeks. The plan was becoming real. That evening, he found Joe from 3B sitting on the building's front steps, head in his hands. Marcus sat beside him, the cold concrete biting through his jeans. "Rough day." Joe laughed bitterly. "Got laid off 2 weeks before Christmas. Merry fucking Christmas, right?" He pulled out a crumpled foreclosure notice. "Third one. I've been hiding them from Tanya. She thinks I'm handling it." Marcus read the notice. 90 days to pay $47,000 in missed payments or lose their home. "I'm sorry, man. You know what kills me?" Joe's voice was thick. "I've worked construction for 20 years. Built luxury condos all over this city, places that sell for millions. And I can't even keep a roof over my own family's head." "Something will work out," Marcus said, the words feeling hollow even as he knew they were true. Joe's mortgage would be the first one paid. "Yeah, you really think so?" Joe stood, swaying slightly. Marcus could smell beer on his breath. "You're a good guy, Marcus. But optimism doesn't pay bills." After Joe went inside, Marcus sat alone on the steps, snow beginning to fall again. 3 weeks until Christmas. 3 weeks to change everything, without anyone knowing. The next day brought an unexpected problem. At the community center, Deshawn pulled him aside, eyes bright with excitement. "Yo, Mr. Chen, you'll never guess what happened." He pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a news article. Some rich dude died and left mad money to charity. They're saying he might have been one of the biggest Bitcoin holders ever. "You think it's real?" Marcus's blood ran cold. The article was about Uncle Henry, though it didn't use his real name. Someone had leaked information about the estate. Could be, Marcus said carefully. Lots of early crypto adopters kept quiet about their holdings. Man, imagine having all that money, Deshawn said. I'd pay off my mom's bills, get her a house, set up college funds for my little sisters. He trailed off, embarrassed. Stupid to dream about it, I guess. Not stupid at all, Marcus said. What else would you do? For real, I'd set up something for the neighborhood. Like, free coding boot camps for kids. Tech internships with real pay. Show kids like me that we can make it in tech without going into debt. His face lit up as he spoke. Maybe partner with big tech companies, get them to invest in communities like ours. Marcus made mental notes. Deshawn's vision was bigger than just paying off debts. It was about creating sustainable change. Uncle Henry would have approved. That afternoon, Sterling called with bad news. The estate settlement is attracting attention. Financial journalists are sniffing around. We need to accelerate the timeline. How much attention? Enough that you should be careful. Large cryptocurrency movements can be traced if someone's motivated enough. Have you consulted with the lawyers about anonymity protocols? Marcus thought about the article Deshawn had shown him. Working on it. How long do I have? Hard to say, weeks, maybe. The crypto community loves a mystery, and a near billion-dollar inheritance is the kind of story that grows legs. After the call, Marcus felt the walls closing in. He'd wanted to move carefully, thoughtfully. Now he might have to act faster than planned. That evening, Linda called with good news. Catherine Winters is brilliant. She's already filed the foundation paperwork. Delaware Incorporation. Completely private. She also has ideas about the distribution mechanism. What kind of ideas? Remember those stories about anonymous donors paying off layaway accounts at Christmas? Same principle, but bigger. We work with mortgage services directly, make payments on behalf of anonymous benefactors. Clean, legal, no direct connection to you. It was elegant. Marcus felt a surge of hope. When can we start? Catherine says you could make the first transfers next week. But Marcus, Linda's voice carried warning. Once you start this, there's no going back. Are you absolutely sure? Marcus looked around his small apartment. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television. The baby crying in 2F, Joe and Tanya's muffled argument about bills. His community, struggling and striving, holding each other up as best they could, I'm sure. The next week passed in a blur of legal documents, secure communications, and careful planning. Marcus maintained his normal routine, volunteering at the community center, helping neighbors with computer problems, sending out job applications he no longer needed. But underneath, he was orchestrating something unprecedented. Catherine had assembled a small team, all bound by ironclad NDA. They'd identified 17 mortgages in Marcus's building alone, totaling $2.3 million. The community center needed $500,000 to stay open. Deshawn's family owed $180,000. The numbers that had once seemed insurmountable now looked like rounding errors. On December 15th, Marcus sat in a secure room at the law firm, multiple laptops open before him. Catherine stood nearby with her team. Ready? She asked. Marcus's hands hovered over the keyboard. Once he started these transfers, his old life would effectively end. He'd still be Marcus Chen, still live in the same apartment, still volunteer at the community center, but he'd also be something else, a secret force, reshaping his community's future. He thought about Uncle Henry, alone in Montana with his fortune. That wouldn't be Marcus's path. He'd found a way to have both wealth and community, to give without taking credit, to lift others without elevating himself above them. Let's do it. The first transfer was to Joe and Tanya's mortgage servicer, $247,000 to pay off their entire loan. The next went to Mrs. Rodriguez, then the Patels, then Sarah and little Mia. One by one, Marcus entered the transactions, each one, a family freed from decades of debt. That's 17 mortgages paid, Catherine announced 90 minutes later. Total transferred, $2.3 million. Marcus leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. When will they know? Mortgage servicers will process the payments within 3 to 5 business days. The families should receive notification by early next week, right before Christmas. Next came the community center. Marcus had structured this differently, an anonymous grant from a private foundation, with funds to cover 5 years of operations plus expansion. Janet would get the call on Monday. As he prepared to leave, Catherine handed him a folder. Media strategy, in case anyone connects you to the inheritance. Deny, deflect, redirect. You're just Marcus Chen, unemployed programmer, looking for work. Not unemployed anymore, Marcus corrected. I'm self-employed. Running a foundation. Catherine smiled. That pays nothing and that no one knows about. Technically, you're still unemployed. On the subway home, Marcus felt the weight of what he'd done. Nearly $3 million, dispersed in an afternoon. By next week, 17 families would wake up to find their largest debt erased. The community center would survive and thrive. It was just the beginning, but as he emerged from the station into the December cold, Marcus saw Deshawn running toward him, face twisted with worry. Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen. The teenager was out of breath. You gotta come quick. It's Joe from your building. He's on the roof, talking crazy. Says he's gonna jump. Police are coming, but his wife said you're the only one he might listen to. Marcus ran, his carefully laid plans suddenly meaningless against the immediate crisis. He'd paid off Joe's mortgage, but the man didn't know that yet. All Joe knew was the weight of failure, the foreclosure notice, the shame of not providing. They raced through the snowy streets, Marcus's mind spinning. He had the power to save Joe financially, had already done so. But right now, that secret fortune meant nothing. Right now, he was just Marcus Chen, neighbor and friend, running to save a life. The building came into view, police cars already outside, lights painting the snow red and blue. On the roof, barely visible, a figure stood at the edge. Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart pounding. He burst onto the roof to find Joe standing dangerously close to the edge, Tanya held back by officers, crying. Joe, Marcus called out. Joe, it's me. Marcus, let's talk, man. Joe turned, his face streaked with tears and snow. Stay back, Marcus, you don't understand. I failed them. I failed everyone. Marcus raised his hands, stepping slowly forward. Behind Joe, the city sparkled, indifferent and beautiful. You didn't fail anyone, Joe. You're just going through a hard time. We all are. A hard time. Joe laughed bitterly. I'm losing my home. Can't provide for my family. What kind of man does that make me? Marcus thought about the transfer he'd made hours ago. Joe's mortgage was already paid. In days, maybe hours, he'd receive notification. But Marcus couldn't say that. All he could offer was presence, friendship, the bonds of community that had nothing to do with money. It makes you human, Marcus said, inching closer. And humans help each other. That's what we do. That's what this neighborhood does. You helped me, Joe. When I first moved in, you helped me carry furniture up for flights. When my dad died, you and Tanya brought food. Let me help you now. With what? You're unemployed too. We're all drowning, Marcus. All of us. Then we swim together, Marcus said. Or we sink together. But we don't give up on each other. That's not who we are. For a long moment, Joe stood perfectly still, balanced between life and death. Snow fell around them, the city noise distant below. Then, slowly, he stepped back from the edge. Marcus caught him as he collapsed, both men falling to their knees in the snow. Tanya broke free from the officers, running to embrace her husband. I'm sorry, Joe sobbed. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Marcus said, holding his friend. Everything's going to be okay. As the police and EMTs took over, Marcus stood to the side, shaking from adrenaline and cold. He'd saved 17 families from financial ruin today, but he'd almost lost one to despair. Money could solve many problems, but not all of them. Not the deep wounds of shame and fear that capitalism carved into working people's souls. His phone buzzed, a text from Catherine, all transfers confirmed. Notifications will go out Monday. Monday, 3 days away. Marcus looked at Joe, being led carefully downstairs, Tanya at his side. 3 days could be a lifetime when you thought you had nothing left to lose. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus made a decision. The anonymous plan was good, necessary even, but it wasn't enough. His community needed more than financial relief. They needed hope, dignity, a sense that they weren't alone. He opened his laptop and began typing. A new plan, building on the first. Not just paying off mortgages, but creating something bigger. Community investment, local business support, education funding, and maybe, eventually, A way to tell the truth that wouldn't destroy what made his neighborhood special. They'd called him unemployed, as if that defined him. But Marcus Chen was learning that identity was more complex than job titles or bank balances. He was unemployed and wealthy, powerful and vulnerable, a keeper of secrets and a member of a community that kept no secrets at all. Outside his window, snow continued to fall, covering the city in temporary grace. Somewhere in the building, Joe slept under medical supervision, unaware that his mortgage had been paid. Mrs. Rodriguez dreamed in her apartment, free of debt she didn't yet know was gone. The community center stood dark but secure, its future guaranteed by anonymous generosity. Marcus saved his document and closed his laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new plans, new ways to transform wealth into community power. But tonight, he was just grateful for the money he could give, for the friend he'd helped save, for the community that had saved him in turn. The unemployed one was becoming something new, something unprecedented. But at his core, he was still Marcus Chen from 4C, neighbor and friend. That would never change, no matter how many millions he gave away. The snow kept falling, and Marcus finally slept, dreaming of a neighborhood transformed, but still, essentially, home. December 19th arrived with chaos. Marcus woke to his phone ringing incessantly. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Turn on the news," she said without preamble. "Channel 7. Now." Marcus fumbled for his remote, dread pooling in his stomach. The local news anchor appeared, standing in front of a building he recognized too well, his own. Mysterious benefactor has paid off every mortgage in this Queens apartment building, totaling over $2 million. Residents woke up to life-changing news just days before Christmas. Double quotes. His phone exploded with texts. The hallway filled with voices crying, shouting, celebrating. Someone was banging on his door. "Marcus, Marcus, open up." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice, high with excitement. He opened the door to find half the building crowded in the hallway. Mrs. Rodriguez threw her arms around him, sobbing. "It's a miracle, mijo, my mortgage gone. 40 years of payments. And now it's just gone." Joe pushed through the crowd, looking stunned. A bandage on his wrist reminded Marcus of that terrible night on the roof. "Did you see the news? Someone paid off everyone's mortgage." "Everyone's, that's incredible," Marcus managed, accepting hugs and handshakes, playing the part of the amazed neighbor. Sarah appeared with Mia, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe it. I was going to lose our home. Mia was going to lose her home. And now," she couldn't finish, overcome with emotion. The impromptu celebration moved to the community center, where another shock awaited. Janet stood in the main hall, surrounded by staff and volunteers, holding an official-looking letter. 5 years of funding. She announced to cheers. "Someone gave us 5 years of guaranteed funding. We can expand programs, hire staff, even pay our volunteers." She caught Marcus's eye. "That means you, Marcus. We can finally pay you for all your work." "I don't need." Marcus started, then stopped. Of course, he'd refuse payment. The unemployed guy always worked for free. Deshawn found him in the computer lab, trying to escape the celebration. "Mr. Chen, you see all this? It's like Christmas came early. My mom's crying. Good crying though. Says we don't have to worry about losing the house anymore." "That's wonderful, D. You know what's crazy? That article I showed you about the Bitcoin fortune. Some people online are saying this might be connected. Like, maybe the person who inherited all that money is doing this." Marcus's pulse quickened. "That seems far-fetched." "I don't know, man. Timeline matches up. And who else has millions to just give away?" Deshawn studied him with those sharp eyes. "You okay? You look kind of pale, just overwhelmed." "It's a lot to process." But the real overwhelm came that afternoon. Catherine called with urgency in her voice. "We have a problem." A financial journalist connected the dots between the mortgage payments and the estate. "They're planning to run a story tomorrow? Can we stop it?" "Not without confirming their suspicions." "Marcus, it might be time to consider controlling the narrative ourselves." That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, listening to the ongoing celebration. Through the walls, he'd wanted to help anonymously, to be the invisible hand that lifted his community without changing his place in it. But maybe that had always been impossible. Maybe transformation at this scale couldn't hide in the shadows. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Chen, this is Rebecca Martinez from the New York Times. I'm writing a story about the Queen's mortgage payments and their possible connection to the Henry Chen estate. I'd like to give you the opportunity to comment. Marcus's throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Chen. I have financial records showing cryptocurrency transfers from wallets associated with the estate to the accounts that paid off those mortgages. You're listed as the sole beneficiary of Henry Chen will die. Would you like to tell your side of the story? He hung up, hands shaking. The walls were closing in. Within hours, more calls came. Reporters had staked out the building. Someone had leaked his photo online, the unemployed programmer who'd inherited nearly $1 billion. The community celebration turned into something else as the news spread. Marcus found himself trapped in his apartment, curtains drawn, as the neighborhood processed this new reality. He could hear the conversations through the walls. Marcus. Our Marcus. The unemployed guy. He's been sitting on millions while we've struggled, but he paid off our mortgages. Why didn't he tell us? Why did he pretend to be poor? The knock on his door that evening was soft, familiar. Mrs. Rodriguez's pattern. Mijo, it's me. Please open up. He let her in, unable to meet her eyes. She studied him for a long moment, then pulled him into a hug. Hey, Marcus. What a burden you've been carrying. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell everyone, but I didn't know how. You fed me when I brought you food, she said, holding his face in her weathered hands. You were rich, and you sat at my table eating leftover pozole. Why? Because your pozole is delicious, Marcus said, voice cracking. Because you're my neighbor. Because that's what we do, we take care of each other. She smiled through tears. The others will understand, in time. But you can't hide anymore. Mijo, this is too big to hide. The next morning, December 20th, Marcus made a decision. He called Catherine. Set up a press conference. He said, tomorrow, at the community center. Are you sure? No. But hiding isn't working anymore. And maybe the truth can do more good than the secret. He spent the day preparing, writing and rewriting what he wanted to say. Linda flew in from San Francisco, finding him at his laptop, surrounded by crumpled papers. You don't have to do this, she said. We can find another way. They deserve the truth, Marcus replied, and maybe I need to tell it. December 21st. The community center was packed. Media from around the world had descended on Queens, drawn by the story of the unemployed programmer who'd secretly paid off his neighbor's mortgages. Marcus stood backstage, nauseated with nerves. You got this, Deshawn said, appearing at his elbow. Just be yourself, Mr. Chen. That's all we ever needed you to be. Janet introduced him to scattered applause. Marcus walked to the podium, looking out at faces he knew so well, neighbors, friends, the community that had sustained him. In the back, he spotted Joe and Tanya, Sarah holding Mia, Mr. Patel from the bodega, Reverend Williams from the Baptist Church. Good morning, he began, voice shaky. My name is Marcus Chen. Until very recently, you knew me as the unemployed guy from 4C. That was true. It's still true, in many ways. But it's not the whole truth anymore. He told them everything. Uncle Henry's isolation, the cryptocurrency fortune, the weight of sudden wealth, his fear of how money would change his relationships, his community, himself. The plan to help anonymously, to lift others without elevating himself above them. I've been unemployed for 18 months, he said. During that time, this community saved me. Not with money, with breakfast plates and coding students. With conversations on stoops and volunteering opportunities that gave me purpose. You saved me by seeing me as more than my employment status. He looked directly at his neighbors. I wanted to return that gift. To see you as more than your mortgage payments, more than your debts. To give you the freedom you gave Mitha, freedom, to be human, to be whole, to be part of something bigger than individual success or failure. The room was silent. Marcus's heart hammered. I know I deceived you. I know trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But I hope, I hope we can find a way forward together. Because this money, it's not really mine. It belongs to communities, like ours, two people who've been told their worth is measured in dollars and cents, rather than in how they care for each other. He outlined his expanded plans. Not just mortgage relief, but community investment. Small business grants, education, funds, healthcare support. A foundation run by the community, for the community. They called me unemployed, Marcus concluded. You called me neighbor. That's the only title I ever wanted. The only one that ever mattered. He stepped back from the podium to absolute silence. Then, slowly, Mrs. Rodriguez stood and began to clap. Deshawn joined her. Then Sarah, then Joe, then others, until the room filled with applause, not the polite applause of a press conference, but the warm, complicated embrace of a community choosing forgiveness. The questions from reporters came fast and sharp, but Marcus found his rhythm. Yes, he had inherited hundreds of millions. Yes, he planned to give most of it away. No, he didn't regret the deception, only the pain it caused. Yes, he would continue, living in 4C. Why? One reporter asked. Why stay in a small apartment when you could live anywhere? Marcus looked at his neighbors. Because home isn't about square footage. It's about the people who see you, who know you, who show up with posol when you're struggling and celebrate with you when you succeed. I'm the wealthiest man in Queens, but that has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. After the conference, as reporters dispersed and cameras packed up, Marcus found himself surrounded by neighbors. The conversations were awkward, tentative, but real. So you're going to keep teaching at the community center? Mr. Kowalski asked, if you'll still have me as a teacher. Well, you're not unemployed anymore, the old man said with a slight smile, but I suppose we can make an exception. Joe approached, Tanya at his side. That night on the roof. You knew my mortgage was paid. Yes, but you didn't say anything. Would it have mattered? You weren't on that roof because of money. Not really. You were there because you felt like a failure. Money can't fix that. Only community can. Joe pulled him into a rough hug. Thank you. For both kinds of saving. As the day wore on, the initial shock gave way to something more complex. There was hurt, certainly. Questions about why he'd hidden, why he'd accepted their help when he didn't need it. But there was also understanding, gradually, that Marcus's deception came from love rather than malice. From a desire to remain connected rather than be set apart. That evening, Linda found him on the building's front steps, the same spot where Joe had shown him the foreclosure notice. How do you feel? She asked. Terrified, Marcus admitted. But also, free. No more secrets. No more pretending. What, now? Now we build something, not just mortgage payments, but real change. Deshawn has ideas about tech education. Janet wants to expand senior programs. Reverend Williams has a whole list of families that need help. We'll do it together, openly this time, and you'll stay here. In this apartment, Marcus looked up at the building. Its worn brick and fire escapes, windows glowing with warm light. Where else would I go? This is home. 6 months later, the community center hummed with new energy. The computer lab had tripled in size, now offering free coding boot camps that Deshawn helped design and teach. Mrs. Rodriguez volunteered in the new commercial kitchen, teaching cooking classes. Joe had started his own construction company with a small business grant, hiring locally, paying fair wages. Marcus still lived in 4C, still taught computer skills to seniors, still debugged neighbors' laptops. But now he also ran foundation meetings, reviewed grant applications, and worked with other communities to replicate their model. The unemployed one had become the employed one, though his salary from the foundation was modest, just enough to pay his bills and contribute to the neighborhood potlucks. The money continued to flow out, transforming not just individual lives but the entire ecosystem of the community. Empty storefronts became small businesses. Families saved for college. Instead of struggling with rent, healthcare costs no longer meant choosing between medicine and food. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was in how the community saw itself. No longer just a collection of struggling individuals, but a network of mutual support with the resources to back it up. They'd been taking care of each other all along. Now they could do it without sacrifice, without scarcity, with abundance that multiplied rather than divided. One evening, as Marcus helped Mr. Chen, still no relation, set up his new tablet for video calls with Beijing, the older man paused. You know what they call you now? He asked. What's that? Not the unemployed one, not even the rich one. Just Marcus, who helps. Marcus smiled. Of all the titles he'd worn, employed, secret millionaire, philanthropist, this was the one he liked best. Outside, Queens bustled with its eternal energy, but something had shifted in this corner of the borough. A community that had always been rich in connection now had the resources to match. Dreams deferred became dreams pursued. survival became thriving. They'd called him unemployed, as if that was all he was. They'd called him rich, as if that defined him. But in the end, Marcus Chen was what he'd always been, a neighbor, a teacher, a member of a community that had redefined what wealth really meant. The fortune Uncle Henry had accumulated in isolation had found its purpose in connection. The crypt that could have built walls had instead built bridges. And Marcus Chen, the unemployed one who'd paid off everyone's mortgage, had discovered that the greatest wealth wasn't in what you owned, but in what you shared. As he walked home through streets he knew by heart, past the bodega where Mr. Patel now smiled without worry lines, past the church where Reverend Williams ran expanded programs, past the laundromat where Maria worked reasonable hours for good pay, Marcus felt the truth of Uncle Henry's words. Community was the only real currency, and by that measure, he was the richest man in New York. The unemployed one had found his job at last. Being human, being connected, being part of something larger than himself. It didn't pay much, but it paid everything. As he climbed the stairs, 2 for C, Marcus could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television, the baby laughing in 2F, the sounds of home. He smiled, pulling out his key. Tomorrow, there would be more grants to review, more lives to change, more communities to lift. But tonight, he was just Marcus from 4C, home where he belonged. The story that began with shame had become one of shared abundance. The secret that nearly destroyed community had instead strengthened it. And the unemployed one. He'd found the only job that mattered, using wealth to reveal what had always been true, that we rise together or not at all. In Queens, in this building, in this community, they'd chosen to rise together. Would you like to tell your side of the story? He hung up, hands shaking. The walls were closing in. Within hours, more calls came. Reporters had staked out the building. Someone had leaked his photo online, the unemployed programmer who'd inherited nearly $1 billion. The community celebration turned into something else as the news spread. Marcus found himself trapped in his apartment, curtains drawn, as the neighborhood processed this new reality. He could hear the conversations through the walls. Marcus. Our Marcus. The unemployed guy. He's been sitting on millions while we've struggled, but he paid off our mortgages. Why didn't he tell us? Why did he pretend to be poor? The knock on his door that evening was soft, familiar. Mrs. Rodriguez's pattern. Mijo, it's me. Please open up. He let her in, unable to meet her eyes. She studied him for a long moment, then pulled him into a hug. Hey, Marcus. What a burden you've been carrying. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell everyone, but I didn't know how. You fed me when I brought you food, she said, holding his face in her weathered hands. You were rich, and you sat at my table eating leftover pozole. Why? Because your pozole is delicious, Marcus said, voice cracking. Because you're my neighbor. Because that's what we do, we take care of each other. She smiled through tears. The others will understand, in time. But you can't hide anymore. Mijo, this is too big to hide. The next morning, December 20th, Marcus made a decision. He called Catherine. Set up a press conference. He said, tomorrow, at the community center. Are you sure? No. But hiding isn't working anymore. And maybe the truth can do more good than the secret. He spent the day preparing, writing and rewriting what he wanted to say. Linda flew in from San Francisco, finding him at his laptop, surrounded by crumpled papers. You don't have to do this, she said. We can find another way. They deserve the truth, Marcus replied. And maybe I need to tell it. December 21st. The community center was packed. Media from around the world had descended on Queens, drawn by the story of the unemployed programmer who'd secretly paid off his neighbor's mortgages. Marcus stood backstage, nauseated with nerves. You got this, Deshawn said, appearing at his elbow. Just be yourself, Mr. Chen. That's all we ever needed you to be. Janet introduced him to scattered applause. Marcus walked to the podium, looking out at faces he knew so well, neighbors, friends, the community that had sustained him. In the back, he spotted Joe and Tanya, Sarah holding Mia, Mr. Patel from the bodega, Reverend Williams from the Baptist church. Good morning, he began, voice shaky. My name is Marcus Chen. Until very recently, you knew me as the unemployed guy from 4C. That was true. It's still true, in many ways. But it's not the whole truth anymore. He told them everything. Uncle Henry's isolation, the cryptocurrency fortune, the weight of sudden wealth, his fear of how money would change his relationships, his community, himself. The plan to help anonymously, to lift others without elevating himself above them. "I've been unemployed for 18 months, he said. "During that time, this community saved me. Not with money, with breakfast plates and coding students. With conversations on stoops and volunteering opportunities that gave me purpose. You saved me by seeing me as more than my employment status." He looked directly at his neighbors. "I wanted to return that gift. To see you as more than your mortgage payments, more than your debts. To give you the freedom you gave me, the freedom to be human, to be whole, to be part of something bigger than individual success or failure." The room was silent. Marcus's heart hammered. "I know I deceived you. I know trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But I hope, I hope we can find a way forward together. Because this money, it's not really mine. It belongs to communities, like ours. Two people who've been told their worth is measured in dollars and cents, rather than in how they care for each other." He outlined his expanded plans. Not just mortgage relief, but community investment. Small business grants, education, funds, healthcare support. A foundation run by the community, for the community. "They called me unemployed," Marcus concluded. "You called me neighbor. That's the only title I ever wanted. The only one that ever mattered." He stepped back from the podium to absolute silence. Then, slowly, Mrs. Rodriguez stood and began to clap. Deshawn joined her. Then Sarah, then Joe, then others, until the room filled with applause, not the polite applause of a press conference, but the warm, complicated embrace of a community choosing forgiveness. The questions from reporters came fast and sharp, but Marcus found his rhythm. Yes, he had inherited hundreds of millions. Yes, he planned to give most of it away. No, he didn't regret the deception, only the pain it caused. Yes, he would continue living in 4C. Why? One reporter asked. Why stay in a small apartment when you could live anywhere? Marcus looked at his neighbors. Because home isn't about square footage. It's about the people who see you, who know you, who show up with Pozole when you're struggling and celebrate with you when you succeed. I'm the wealthiest man in Queens, but that has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. After the conference, as reporters dispersed and cameras packed up, Marcus found himself surrounded by neighbors. The conversations were awkward, tentative, but real. So you're going to keep teaching at the community center? Mr. Kowalski asked, if you'll still have me as a teacher. Well, you're not unemployed anymore, the old man said with a slight smile, but I suppose we can make an exception. Joe approached, Tanya at his side. That night on the roof. You knew my mortgage was paid. Yes, but you didn't say anything. Would it have mattered? You weren't on that roof because of money. Not really. You were there because you felt like a failure. Money can't fix that. Only community can. Joe pulled him into a rough hug. Thank you. For both kinds of saving. As the day wore on, the initial shock gave way to something more complex. There was hurt, certainly. Questions about why he'd hidden, why he'd accepted their help when he didn't need it. But there was also understanding, gradually, that Marcus's deception came from love rather than malice. From a desire to remain connected rather than be set apart. That evening, Linda found him on the building's front steps, the same spot where Joe had shown him the foreclosure notice. How do you feel? She asked. Terrified, Marcus admitted. But also, free. No more secrets. No more pretending. What, now? Now we build something, not just mortgage payments, but real change. Deshawn has ideas about tech education. Janet wants to expand senior programs. Reverend Williams has a whole list of families that need help. We'll do it together, openly this time, and you'll stay here. In this apartment, Marcus looked up at the building. Its worn brick and fire escapes, windows glowing with warm light. Where else would I go? This is home. 6 months later, the community center hummed with new energy. The computer lab had tripled in size, now offering free coding boot camps that Deshawn helped design and teach. Mrs. Rodriguez volunteered in the new commercial kitchen, teaching cooking classes. Joe had started his own construction company with a small business grant, hiring locally, paying fair wages. Marcus still lived in 4C, still taught computer skills to seniors, still debugged neighbors' laptops. But now he also ran foundation meetings, reviewed grant applications, and worked with other communities to replicate their model. The unemployed one had become the employed one, Though his salary from the foundation was modest, just enough to pay his bills and contribute to the neighborhood potlucks, the money continued to flow out, transforming not just individual lives but the entire ecosystem of the community. Empty storefronts became small businesses. Families saved for college. Instead of struggling with rent, healthcare costs no longer meant choosing between medicine and food. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was in how the community saw itself. No longer just a collection of struggling individuals, but a network of mutual support with the resources to back it up. They'd been taking care of each other all along. Now they could do it without sacrifice, without scarcity, with abundance that multiplied rather than divided. One evening, as Marcus helped Mr. Chen, still no relation, set up his new tablet for video calls with Beijing, the older man paused. "You know what they call you now?" he asked. "What's that?" "Not the unemployed one. Not even the rich one. Just Marcus, who helps." Marcus smiled.